Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Thanks, sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, Topps, Panini, and Upper Deck. Today's episode, the interview of me by Darren Revell, who's starting up Collect. It's Collect, I guess, without the vowels. .com, where he's going to have a media presence on a regular basis. Looking forward to that. He had done a lot of homework on the Michael Jordan XRC over the years. And so he wanted to talk to me. I was happy to talk to him. We talked for about 45 minutes, really just about that. He's very in-depth, but I've distilled it to 20 minutes. I couldn't get it down to 15, but I hope you'll receive my apology. There was some good stuff in there. Again, Darren is an investigative journalist. He wanted to get the real story of what was going on. So eavesdrop on our conversation. And then I'll be back in a couple of days because his article now has since come out and I'll have a response to that. So that'll be the next episode. You should read the article. A lot of good stuff in there. Again, thanks for all your hard work, Darren, and others who dig deep in this hobby. I really appreciate it. And here it is. Back in the day, Darren, I was buddies with Steve Taft and Todd Krosner I knew pretty well, Bill Schoncheck, Norman and Judy Kay.
These guys are all the star dealers.
Probably one or two others, and Robert did some of his own. I was in regular contact with them because the annual price guides, even before the magazine, I'd try to get sales input from them, and they were wholesalers, but they probably also retail. They'd have the tables at shows that I'd go to, and I'd visit with them. I could look at their table and see what they had a lot of or see what was being sold. But all of them had in common that they weren't really mainstream distributors/dealers. They didn't sell vintage cards. They didn't have the typical table stock that you would see in the 80s. They had a lot of small sets. So they weren't in the inner circle of very much a vintage hobby back in those days. If you went to the big shows, all the shows were like Strongsville or the Philly show in that sense. It's a bit misleading. The 84-85 Star, which I think you were calling 84, which I've always called it 84-85. It came out in spring of 85.
Right.
And that was not appropriate for most of the mainstream card manufacturers. Cards usually came out at the beginning of the year. This was the end of the season year. And 86-87 Fleer came out
fall of 86.
Yeah. So there's a little more than a year separating them, not 3 years.
Right. People say, oh, it's 3. I've heard you mention this before, that they weren't really mainstream guys, or that you couldn't get the star baggies nationally, which I guess if you called, you could. Why do I care about that?
In one sense, it doesn't. Let me get to that. But what took PSA so long? If I'm the bad guy in this, why were we the ones that were grading them? And PSA is sitting on the sidelines, and they're very capitalistic, very hobby savvy. They were rejecting, maybe it's their guarantee. Yep. You definitely should ask Joe Orlando, because we're mainly talking about his regime when he was there. But not only were we not dissing Star Company basketball, we were the only ones really giving them the benefit of the doubt. And again, a lot of that was thanks to Steve. Star Company had reputational issues. Real or imagined. I think there were real and imagined.
Yeah, I agree.
So how could I be the guy putting down Star Company when I'm the only guy grading Star Company and putting them in the price guides and tracking the pricing and reporting that? And nobody was complaining you're too low or too high. I gave Star Company air, and PSA did not. I had conversations with Robert Levin over the years, mainly in those early days, and it was cordial. His conversations with me were strictly about, I sure hope you're going to list my sets in the book.
Right.
Basically, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. That's why I hate being falsely accused when I bent over backwards to give him a fair shake. But we did draw the line on some of those sets where Steve Taft has figured out, hey, these were contraband, not all of which are from Robert Levin, but there are some suspicious sets. But those sets in the heyday, in that 83 to 86 period, Steve Taft is convinced that those weren't the ones who were reprinted, which is curious because that's where a lot of value is. But I trust Steve. Anyway, so Robert Levin, the only thing he ever talked about is, I just want you to track my sets. People don't realize that our company was not just a price guide. We were price guides, annual and magazines. We didn't do a basketball magazine until 1990.
Yeah, until 1990.
But so really we're just talking about the books. But the second part of our company before we did grading was the nomenclature aspect and trying to help the hobby A level playing field was one of the goals and objectives, and to give some clarity so people could understand where the values were coming from. The nomenclature helped people understand a card that predates the rookie card, but is not universally accepted as a.
And did that come down in 85, 86? Because I remember
that came down in 85, and that was strictly for baseball. Basically, it was because
the Cal cards, the 82, 83 card.
Not so much. It really hit in 83 with Darryl Strawberry. And then Roger Clemens.
Because he was in the 83 trade.
Extended, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And the purists wanted that card to not only not say XRC. You hear about people saying, well, that ought to be his rookie card. There was groundswell. That should not be a rookie card. It shouldn't even be an XRC. It should be a nothing.
It should be only way you could get it within a set was
that it was a cash grab. That anybody that had the money could get the set. That's not true, because the only way to get the set is if you bought it from a dealer. There were thousands of hobby shops in that time, and that was our primary customer. But you had to buy 100 sets, Darren.
No,
you had to buy 100 sets of the 83 Topps Extended. Okay.
I never heard that story.
But they were $5, $6, $7. Okay. So they weren't expensive, but still, for a hobby shop, what mom and pop shop wants to take 100 sets?
No.
Okay. So it was not egalitarian that your local hobby shop, anybody could get it. So there was a sense of fair play to the smaller dealers and to collectors, that it needed to be universally available. Pack pulled is only one of the things. It's the most famous of those rules. But
got it,
Darren, as soon as we would say what the rules were, the card companies would try to bend the rules. Pack pulled, really, that was the Darryl Strawberry 83 Topps Extended.
Right.
That was one of the main things. It was box set, only available to dealers on a limited basis, even though it had national distribution in a sense. It wasn't the traditional things. Pack pulled was the easiest thing for people to grasp, but it was more than that. You had to know somebody, the opposite of the democratic ideal I was trying to promote.
Did you have to know somebody with the star set?
It wasn't widely advertised. If you went to a big show, one of those dealers might be there. Like I said, I'd see them there. I went to a lot of the big shows. I was crazy travel schedule in those days. I'd see those guys, and they were regional. In fact, the Star Company was almost thought to be more of a regional issue. None of this was a problem in the 70s. It was only as you got into the early 80s that the card companies, especially Topps, did the same thing with the Topps football. And the crazy thing is that in every one of those instances I'm mentioning, the XRC is more valuable than the RC.
Oh, really?
In every one of those cases.
The Steve Young USFL.
Steve Young, Reggie White, Jim Kelly, Kirby Puckett, Roger Clemens from 84 Fleer, updates, Darryl Strawberry even. Which rookie card do you want to have? So the power that people think that I had when I call it an XRC, it's disrespecting it. No, it actually, upside down, was elevating it. It gave it recognizable status. And I don't know that it was less than, because the fact that it's an XRC meant it came out before the RC. But I was giving the market a chance to figure out, is it worth more? Okay, so fast forward to spring of 1990. The basketball magazine comes out.
Jordan cover
from the very get-go, because of the precedent established with baseball. It was obvious. It wasn't even disputed in any mainstream
story
at that time. There was no story at the time. It wasn't controversial. It was a normal
first issue. It had
Star X,
and that was the first time
it was designated that way. And again, the upside down part, the Star XRC was valued higher than the Fleer rookie. Okay, and so
here. Wait, hold on. Go ahead.
I had a choice to not even list the Star Company. I had a number of people saying, don't even put them in. They are not worthy of the ink on the paper, because it's an illegitimate company that their heyday had gone and passed.
Sports Card Trader magazine in July of 1990. It was the first card of the 80s to hit $1,000. So do you know what the prices were in that 1990 issue?
$200.
It was $200 for the Star.
But here's the thing, Darren.
Yep.
As soon as that basketball magazine hit, it started a bull market in basketball. Again, I'm the friend of basketball. I'm the friend of Star. Once it got in there, even though there were naysayers that said, don't give them the light of day because there are so many questionable business practices there. And I said, I'm going to let the market decide. And I'm only printing
it's true.
Okay, but that started the bull market.
I was a huge fan of Jordan, a huge fan of the NBA. I didn't even consider buying a card before 89 at all.
All I'm saying is when the basketball magazine came out in the spring of 90, it started a boom in basketball cards where all the quality started dramatically increasing. My point is, in the very first issue, already the XRC was worth more than the RC. Robert Levin didn't even ask for the star sets to be in the magazine. He only asked about the book when I talked to him. He was delighted, I'm sure, but that decision it had nothing to do with the XRC. He wasn't even concerned about that. He wanted things to be listed, and he was delighted they were in the annual press guide, or biannual at that time.
So the whole idea that you wanted to help Fleer is the stupidest thing ever.
That's upside down. Because I'll get to that.
XRC doesn't mean not rookie card, X, the rookie card.
It means pre-rookie card. It means not a full rookie card according to the traditional definition. But if you read between the lines, it means it predates the rookie card. Otherwise, it wouldn't even be listed. When I did the books, at that time, there was no RCs or XRCs in the annual books, just the raw listing.
I've heard you said before, you bought a baggie and you knew what you were getting in it.
It was deterministic.
That's also.
The only thing is you didn't know what condition other than the first and last cards were in terms of corner dings or centering. So if some was interior.
So what is that? It must be at random? What is that qualifier?
The problem I had, Darren, is I'm trying to be the Solomon, the wise judge, is that you couldn't do musts. You couldn't do a must, because if it was a must, then they'd say, we'll randomize it in some way. They would try to beat the system. But as the Star Company sets came out, it was deterministic and it was not as readily available. Nobody confused Star Company with Topps before them in doing basketball, or Fleer coming after them doing basketball, or Hoops even later. They were completely different cut of cloth. And in fact, look at the other sports: Wild Card, Collector's Edge, Pro Set in their bad days.
Football 1991.
There were companies coming and going at that time. And here we are trying to be the voice of the hobby and the price guide of the hobby to try to be fair. Like I said, I'm trying to let the collectors and the dealers decide by tracking the cards. And again, that's separate from the nomenclature. Regardless, if I left off XRC or put RC, the price would be the price. If it's a regional issue or a test issue, it couldn't be a rookie card. Even if it came out in the rookie yard, it just wasn't available to all the people.
The guys today say, oh, you could have called up the ad. There was a national ad or two.
Yeah, but called up. It was 3 sparse. Here's the thing. They didn't sell out, Darren. If it was marketed to the whole hobby, why didn't they sell out? And why did these guys still have remainders?
They lost money every year.
Yeah. Anyway, XRC was just putting words or initials to the feelings that people were having. They needed to know this was a card that wasn't being overlooked, but it had that special designation. One other thing, as we're getting into the card company aspect here, is there was a company that pressured me about putting cards in the magazine. That company was Classic.
Oh,
that was Ken.
Classic and
Ken Golden and his dad, Paul. I actually got along great with Ken and Paul, but Paul was more my contemporary.
That was also around 1991.
The early 90s. They even had some sets before that, but the early 90s, all the classic games, and then the 4-sport, the 5-sport, and Ken, extremely persuasive. But I also know Ken. He's a promoter. And he didn't offer me any illegal inducements, but he made it very clear he wanted his classic sets in the baseball magazine. I have respect for Ken for who he is, but he has respect for me because I did not succumb to that pressure. Okay. It wouldn't have been a horrible decision, but it wasn't the right decision. So even Classic, because of the configuration of their sets and the way it was done, it just didn't have the feel of the Topps, Bowman, Donruss Leaf playoff, all those different things. Again, Ken, still friends, no hard feelings, but that's the company that put pressure on us. Okay, now we're getting to Fleer. Number one, advertising was a very small portion of our revenue back in those days. Very small. We were mainly selling magazines, and we had the trust of the dealers, the hobby shops, and the collectors. So the advertisers had no power of us. The other upside down part of this that really galls me, Darren, is that of all the card companies, the most prickly, The worst relationship we had was Fleer. Fleer at one point was our biggest advertiser, and they called up our advertising guy and said, you know what? It's not moving the needle for us. We're your biggest advertisers, and you're not giving us preferential treatment. And if you don't do that, we're going to pull our ads. So my ad guys came to me and said, hey, this is a fair amount of revenue. We don't want to lose this. We can't. It's not fair to Tops. It's not fair to Upper Deck. We had a very cordial relationship with those. I said, we're being fair to all. And so we called their bluff, Darren. And we said, if that's the way you feel, you're going to have to, if you don't want to, well, and so for 6 months, they withheld their ads from us. And at the end of the 6 months, they call me and said, why don't you come up here? We need to talk. Because it wasn't working for them. Because our advertising was the best advertising they'd done. Okay. I went up there. I said, look, we're not going to do anything different. You're definitely not going to get any special treatment. If you advertise more, you'll get more impressions. Okay. And again, nothing came up about, hey, what about this XRC Jordan 101?
Right.
All the card companies cared about is their current or next product. Said, we can help you with your sell-through because we have a lot of circulation. We're in a trusted position, but we're not going to give you any preferential treatment over anybody else.
That always seemed weird to me, that they would care about something 4 years earlier. Like what?
No, they cared about the next product, and basically Fleer wanted to be first among equals. And I said, no, you got part of that right. You're equals. Your products are going to be judged on the merits. Trying to be very fair. Again, Star never came into that conversation because that was ancient history. A reluctant champion of Star because I think they did a lot of things wrong, but they don't deserve to be ignored or treated as a non-card or contraband, even though there probably is some contraband that has Star company logos on it. But we didn't list those. These basic NBA sets, especially the 3 sets, those are part of the hobby lore and vernacular. The fact that they're XRCs, I lose no sleep about that, Darren. And I have no secrets to keep, and none of my people have any secrets to keep. So to think that Fleer and I were in bed, nothing could be farther from the truth. It was distasteful working with at least one of the regimes there. And I hope enough time has gone by that I'm not slandering anybody. Yeah. But it was difficult to work with them. It wasn't easy to work with Richard McWilliam either, but we had mutual respect. We worked some deals. God. Richard and I got along fine. And same thing with the Tops guys. Each company had their own thing. The whole thing about these sets, we're now convinced in the industry there's only 2 or 3 printers in the world that can print cards. And that's upside down. For Star Company, there are 2 or 3 million printers that can print those cards because it's just ink on thin cardstock. Right. It's game used and insertion ratios and autographs and embedded relics. That's what is limited capacity. But Robert Levin could have gone down the street to not a quick print, but it's not a tricky. I'm just saying, if it's not in the price guide, back in that day, that was the big issue. If it was in the price guide, it legitimized it. The biggest favor I did Star was putting them in the price guide and then in the magazine, which was unsolicited, at least for the mag. But these other sets, they're just like the Broders. They're just unauthorized sets. And NBA is saying, we got no royalties on this. So whether it's the printer, Robert Levin did not run a tight ship. Nobody was going to confuse his operation for Tops or Fleer or anybody else like that. So mistakes could happen. And I don't think he was doing that great. If it's 5 or 10,000 sets.
What is amazing is that even when you look at the pop numbers now, even if Steve wasn't right, it couldn't have been that crazy because there's none of them.
That's part of the thing why it'd be an XRC, though, just to bring it back to that. The XRC thing was alerting people, this is not a mass-produced. The different distribution. Yes, of course, it's not pack-pulled, but there's other things associated with this that make this unusual and not worthy in that qualitative sense or quantitative sense of being a full rookie card. In fact, what would happen if the Star Company card had been designated by me, and it was my call, it wasn't anybody else's call. If I'd have put an RC on that, I'd have had a lot of people mad at me. Frankly, the 86, 87 Fleer, not just the Jordan, but all the other rookies that had Star stuff, the boom that we saw and the excitement of 86, 87 Fleer unopened cases and things like that wouldn't be happening because it'd be a 3rd-year Jordan card. The other rule for rookie cards, it's been broken now with the Gehrig exhibit, but generally speaking, back in the old days, you couldn't be an oversized card and be a rookie card. So any Jordan Court Kings or 5x7s or something like that,
Right.
even if it was done in 84, 85, not the rookie card. Again, everything has been relaxed.
What do you think?
Are you an NBA fan?
Yeah.
I've had season tickets to the Mavs for 32 years, and finally they're playing defense and rebounding.
I can't believe they won that game.
I can't. I was there. Okay, but here's the thing. The rule book, I don't think has changed, but traveling and palming is completely called different.
Absolutely.
What's happened in our hobby is that even though we have these rules, there's a look the other way of being more lenient. That's our culture. Selective enforcement. That's what's happening here.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Darren. Keep up the good work. And I wish you well on your collecting.